Welcome to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network with your hostess, Jen Josie. Join like-minded real estate investors and accelerate your business towards greatness. You will hear step-by-step strategies for success, interviews with real estate rock stars, and we will dig deep into past projects where we bear it all, including the good, the bad, and some just plain ugly. So get excited. Here's the bestower of badassery herself, the real Jen Josie. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen Josie, creator of RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Whoop, whoop. On today's episode, we have a guest that will be sharing their badassery. But before we begin, here's today's badassery bestowment, my little badass gift to you. Today's topic is know your restrictions before you buy a short-term rental. When selecting a location for your short-term rental property, it's crucial to carefully examine and comprehend local restrictions and regulations. Here are 5 key points to consider before you buy. Number 1, duration and frequency restrictions. Investigate any limitations on the duration and frequency of short-term rentals imposed by the local municipality. Understanding these restrictions help you align your rental plans with legal requirements. Number 2, licensing requirements. Check if there are specific licensing or permit requirements for operating short-term rentals in the chosen area. Obtaining the necessary permits ensures that you're operating within the bounds of the law. Number 3, zoning regulations. Look into local zoning regulations to confirm that the property allows short-term rentals. Zoning laws can vary, and compliance is crucial to avoid legal complications. Number 4, community and HOA rules. If your property is part of a homeowners association or community, review their rules and guidelines regarding short-term rentals. Some communities may have strict regulations to maintain a certain atmosphere. Number 5, noise and nuisance regulations. Check for any noise restrictions or nuisance regulations that may impact your short-term rental. Being mindful of these rules helps in maintaining positive relationships with neighbors and the local community. By thoroughly examining these specific topics, you can make well-informed decisions about your short-term rental investment, ensuring legal compliance and a smoother operation. Ignoring or overlooking these restrictions could lead to legal issues, fines, or even the shutdown of your short-term rental business. Now, on to today's episode of the Real Estate Investor Growth Network podcast. We have with us my new friend, Jason Kogok. Jason started his real estate career over 2 decades ago as a real estate sales broker, and since then has grown his team to the top ranks in North Carolina. He also manages his own real estate portfolio of long and short-term rentals, along with fix and flip properties along the way. In addition to real estate, Jason has a passion for teaching real estate brokers, investors, as well as individual investors to help scale their portfolios. He teaches at Wake Tech and hosts seminars at North Carolina State University, wrote a book on investing, and teaches continuing education approved courses for North Carolina Real Estate Commission. I had the pleasure of meeting Jason at a recent meetup and knew immediately I needed him on the show. So buckle up, listeners, and let's welcome Jason Kogok.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank
We
you
just
for
found
having
out we're neighbors.
Yeah.
We even
small
attend
world.
the same bar on occasion.
That's right. That's right.
Shocking. I haven't seen you there yet, but
Yeah.
I have my
You're
own.
the early crowd.
I'm kind of the early crowd. Anyway, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. I've lived in this area for almost 2 decades now, but I've been in real estate 7 years as of today, by the way. This is getting released on April 1st, which is our 7-year business anniversary. And I have never crossed paths with you. And Jason, I got to tell you, you blew my mind with stuff that you were saying at this meetup. You were the presenter that evening. And I was like, oh my gosh, we need to be best friends and I need you on my show. So awesome. First of all, give us a quick background how you got involved with real estate.
Yeah. So, about in early 2002, I really had a desire to kind of get into investing and renovating and all that good stuff. And in order to afford to be able to do that at that time, I had to do real estate sales because I had my license. And so, what's happened over 20 years, I kind of joke. I was like, I started to do real estate investments and somehow we built this team of real estate sales just over the course of time. So, that's kind of where my focus has been, is sales and investing. And in 2010, I started teaching and has kind of grown that. And that has turned out to be just something that I truly love to do. And so, yeah, here I am.
Well, what I also like about you is you're an educator, and I can tell that by every means of everything that you do. And I think that's why I was like completely drawn to you, because I think when you get in this industry, you have the opportunity to make some good money and then really turn around and give back your time, which is what you do, and you do so very well. So the topic of the presentation when I met you at this meetup was about setting goals. And you said a couple of things that kind of blew my mind. And so I'm going to let you take it from there. We were, and just really quick, so I want to make sure that you hit on this. You were telling us not to be caught up in prices and what things make now, but to look more into the future. And that, especially with the way real estate is right now, it's getting a little bit harder to find deals at the moment. Yep. So I just wanted to lay that foundation there, but tell us how to set some realistic goals, especially in this time of real estate.
Yeah, no, thanks. One of the main things I kind of try to teach people is first understand what your goal is. Too often we are presented with the idea that our goal is monetary. And one of the things I truly believe is that nobody really wants to die with a bunch of money in the bank. I think, when I turn that question around to students that I'm teaching or mentoring, I always kind of say, if you don't want to die with a bunch of money in the bank, what do you really want to do? And it always circles back to time. I want to do what I want to do, right? And that's different for everybody. And I'm not naive to the fact that obviously that comes with a price. If I want to sit on a beach in the Bahamas for the rest of my life, hey, that's going to cost me something. So money is certainly inputted in that. But I think when we focus on the money aspect as the quote unquote goal, we lose sight of what we're really trying to do. And as a byproduct of that, we end up selling the very precious thing we are trying to retain, which is our time.
So true.
And, we put so much on our plate to reach this monetary value. And I think a lot of times we're looking at it the wrong way. So I always teach people, money is not your goal. Money is a tool. If I gave you $1 and I gave myself $1, what we do with that dollar could be dramatically different in what it means to us. But your dollar wasn't any more special than my dollar, right? Because it's the same hammer. It's the same screwdriver. It's just who's using it. I was teaching yesterday and I was telling people, I was like, look, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, their dollar is the same as my dollar.
Right.
They just used it in a much better way than I could have ever imagined, right? But their dollar never started any more special. And so when you start to look at money as a tool instead of this end goal, it helps you start to focus like, wow, how could I use that tool more efficiently? So where do you keep, just not even talking real estate, where do you keep your money right now? And a lot of people keep it in a regular bank and they're earning maybe, 0.5%. And yet there's these banks out there that are FDIC insured that are offering you 5%. And so one person takes that same dollar and they make a nickel and the other person makes a half a penny. And then they constantly say, I need more dollars.
Right.
No, you don't need more hammers. You need to learn how to use the hammer you have. And so I think that's really important. And then trying to switch your mindset before you ever set a goal to say, look, I buy things with time, not money. And so if you're looking at you're looking at a car payment and it's an $800 car payment, you say, well, I can afford $800. And I view it differently. I say, do I have available the number of hours it takes me to earn $800? Because that's what it is, right? And so in turn, again, you're selling your time for whatever it is that you want. And I think if you start to set up with what do you want to do with your time, and then apply a monetary figure to it and kind of work backwards based on the number of years you have until you would ideally like to reach that goal. And I should say ideally and realistic, right? I'd love to be sitting on a beach right now.
Right.
But we're working towards it, right? So you're not naive on how the world works. And I think setting those goals, I just think a lot of people don't set those realistic goals because they're afraid. I think they are confused. And so the natural reaction to that, instead of trying to see what I want, what I have, how short I am, we just say, well, let me go get more of it. And if I keep getting more of it, it will eventually get me where I want to be. And I try to tell people, no, usually when you just have more of it, it just finds other holes to go to.
You have more problems that come along with it.
No money, more problems. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah. So
it's very easy to position your goals around a price or a monthly amount, something that you want to, that you bring in that is very comfortable. And so you also have a system of helping people figuring out your number and then your gap number, which I need you to explain the difference there, and then how to hit those targets.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I tell people is let's start at the end. What do we want? Right. And so let's say I want to retire at the beach in 15 years. Okay. Well, when am I buying that beach house? Am I buying it now, if I can, and renting it out? Or am I buying it actually in 15 years? Right. What is that going to cost me in either scenario? And then looking at, well, what is it going to cost me to live after I have my housing, wherever that may be? What is it going to cost me to live? What are the differences I'm going to have then that I don't have now? So higher medical cost is always one of those things, right? Maybe more travel, right? If you're working a lot, you're maybe not traveling as much. So what are these things that you're going to have then? And let's apply a figure. And then let's look at what you have right now. And let's decide that if you change nothing else in your investment strategy right now, what would you have in that 15 years or whenever you want to retire, right? And you're basically going to have two numbers. What would I have if I don't change anything? And then in essence, almost what do I need? The difference between that is what we call your gap number. That's what you're short.
Okay.
And really, while a lot of people focus on that end number, I tell them, no, just focus on the gap. That's what you have to make up. And so if I feel like my gap number is $854,000. My gap number right now to hit my targets and live the life and blah, blah, blah. So I look at it as, okay, over the next 12 years, how do I make an extra 850 some thousand, right? Because that's really where I'm short. And then I usually tell people, because one of the things that trips a lot of people up is, well, it's going to be wrong. And I always, of course it's going to be wrong. I don't know the thing. Yeah, of course it's going to be wrong.
No one has a crystal ball.
Yeah. I tell people, look, some things are written in sand, some things are written in stone, and your goals are going to be written in sand. But I would much rather have something written in sand than have nothing. And that's what the vast majority of people do. I try to coach people and say, hey, look, if you were to stand 100 yards away from a brick building, it's a brick building, but you have no idea how many bricks are in there. And as you walk closer to that brick building, all of a sudden, now you can start to count a few more, and then you get right in front and you can count them easily. That's how to look at this, is understand that when you start a ways out, you need some money, you need what you think is right, but you can't tell. But as you walk closer to that timeline and you perfect it, all of a sudden things come much clearer. Too many people wait until they're standing in front of that brick building, and then it's too late.
Right.
And so that's how I kind of advise people. I also tell people, because people always want to know, well, what's a margin of error to use? A real simple way is 1% margin of error for every year until you want to retire. So if you're 10 years away and you come up that you need $3.5 million, then add 10% to that. And then next year you add 9%, 8%. And by adding that margin of error that decreases and by tweaking your numbers every 3 to 6 months, all of a sudden you're going to start to see that, wow, what I wrote in sand 5 years ago is now really starting to turn into stone. And that's some of those mental images I think help people.
We need to hang out more because I am just loving everything that you're saying. So when Vance and I were sitting there, I was telling you, I was elbowing him in the rib cage. He came home with bruises, but you were talking, and to me, it makes total sense. And you're a finance guy. Vance is a finance guy. I'm the I dream big, and he will
have both.
There you go. So you were talking about how people get so caught up on just the price of what they make. We're talking rentals, long-term rentals, for example. And I was taught by a coach that you should be making at least $300 per door, and you get fixated on that number. But you said things, I was like, Jason, talk dirty to me. That this is where I was like, fancy. So explain it in the Jason way, which was so eloquently done, of how you shouldn't be so caught up on the cash flow, that there are so many other things. And this is where you just shine. So I'm going to shut up and let you talk.
No, you're fine. Yeah. I mean, the reality is the vast majority of people that make wealth in real estate actually aren't making it from cash flow. That $300 a month is not making you wealthy. Okay. It is making you maybe a little bit richer, but you're trading your time to earn that $300. The vast majority of actual wealth is built on the value side, the value appreciation, principal pay down of holding a property for 10, 15, 20 years, accumulating tax benefits and 1031 exchanges. Like, that's where the vast majority of wealth is. However, the idea of cash flow is what is the sexy part and what sells, because I can touch it, feel it, spend it today.
Right.
And we live in a world where people don't want to wait for the pat on the back. They want that pat on the back today. They want to be validated today that this is working. And, I just think that while cash flow is important, I think so many people go out and choose the wrong property because it cash flows, when they could go out and maybe choose a different property that didn't cash flow nearly as much, but maybe it appreciates 2 to 3% more. Maybe it's a better location or a better property, and I have much lower vacancy for the next 10 years. I'm not renting it every 10 to 12 months. I'm getting somebody in there and they're staying there for 2 or 3 years because they love the location. Cash flow be damn, I don't want vacancy, And so I think sometimes because cash flow is what excites people, and I think people envision the cash flow changing their life, $300 is not changing most people's lives per month.
Exactly.
We'll take it.
Yep.
I'll never turn down $300. You want to give it to me. But I'm not quitting tomorrow because I have $300. And the cash flow grows over time. And so really where your cash flow is going to come in is that decade later, where you bought it today and you have so much going to principal, the rent has outpaced the expenses. That's where your cash flow comes anyway. So whether I start at $50, $100, or $300 today, I'm not bragging about it for another decade until I'm clearing $1,000 a month. And then wherever I started is almost a moot point.
Right. Well, I just feel like you said that so well, and it started clicking in Vance's brain. So I appreciate that. So this leads me to my next question. And I know you work with individuals and grow their portfolios for them. So how would you grow your real estate portfolio? Just like maybe say a 401k portfolio of some sort.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I think is important is understanding most investors are never going to own more than 5-6 properties, right? I think most people that are going to get into the rent, at least in my experience, we hear about the people that own 10, 20, 30, 100, 200, whatever, right? That's what you hear about. But if you look at the stats, statistically, most mom and pop investors are going to own a couple houses. Some are by accident. They moved and they couldn't sell it in a down market, or, especially in what we're seeing today, where somebody's got a 3 or 4% interest rate and they're like, I know I'm outgrowing this house, but I'm not selling it. Right. But they're not going to own a whole lot. And so when you're only owning a handful of properties, it's like saying, hey, look, I'm going to base my entire retirement on 5 stocks. You're going to probably be real particular about those 5 stocks. You're also going to want them to be diversified, right? You're not going to put all your money in Apple. You're going to put some in Apple. You're going to put some in Johnson & Johnson or Walmart and a not sexy, type of stock. You're going to put a little bit in the risk, right? In case that stock shoots up to the moon. And so I always tell people to kind of create those houses in the shape of a triangle, right? And you always want to have your safety at the bottom, right? That's what holds up your entire portfolio. And so I always relate it to, again, when we go back to stocks, is let's say Johnson & Johnson or Procter & Gamble or Walmart is this, or Coca-Cola, non-sexy company, been around 100 years, not going anywhere. I'm going to pay a premium to buy that stock. And I'm going to pay that premium because it's offsetting my risk. Almost any market, those stocks do decent, right? That should be your first house. So instead of running out there and looking for this risky deal or feeling like you need to make a bunch of money on day one, go buy your Walmart, go buy your Johnson & Johnson. Because as soon as you do that, even though you'll be like, I feel like I overpaid or it's not cash flowing great, every other decision you make as you build towards that pinnacle allows you to take more and more risk. It's in a smaller proportion, right? As you get to the top of the triangle, it is your riskiest position, but it's also not your largest position. And since you're only buying 5 of them, you can feel secure in doing that. Now, again, there's another group of people that say, hey, I'm only buying 5. I'm going to roll the dice on all 5. But because you don't get to control the market in which you sell or the market and when you need that money, gosh, that's if you're only going to have a couple, that seems really, really risky. The other thing I think that's important about when you build a portfolio like that is to make sure that each house is providing something different inside of that portfolio, right? So we talked about your Walmart being that your stability. It gives you the base of that triangle to build all your risk off of that. Well, then I might start to look for a cash flowing property. Because, now I've got cash flow that offsets the cash flow I'm not getting from my stable property. And then my third property might be a property in a somewhat transitional area. So areas that look like they're moving in the right direction. You can see dirt being moved in commercial space and they're building and you're like, okay, it's just starting, but at least they're moving dirt. And then, I might move up to hey, I'm going to buy a house and that house is going to be torn down in the future. Or, hey, I'm going to buy a house where
you are talking about my personal rental portfolio right now. Every single one of what you just said.
Yeah, but that's exactly it, right? It's not rocket science. It's just stop chasing everything you hear as successful, right? We see it, you and I talked about short-term rentals. Short-term rentals have obviously become really popular in the last couple of years. So I get all these people say, oh, I'm going to do a short-term rental. I'm like, well, you haven't even done a long-term rental.
Right.
Like, do it in progression. And then all of a sudden you become an expert slowly in these various fields. I always relate it again, when we go back to like stock market, I tell people, when you worry about prices and stuff like that, I always say, hey, do you have a 401k? Yep, I do. Do you invest on a regular basis or are you trying to time the market? And they're always like, we can't time the market. I invest on a regular basis because I know over time it'll weigh in my favor. And then I say, okay, then why the hell are we out here trying to search for this deal in real estate when you've just proven to me in all of your other investments, you understand that it takes time and diversification. But in your real estate, which is going to cost you the most, you're searching for this risky unicorn. And it doesn't add up. And again, you own 200 houses, cash flow, you're already diversified. You can shoot for that consistent cash flow. But when you're only having a couple, I don't know.
And for the listeners out there, this is so huge because, you you look at other people around you and what they're doing, and you think that's where I need to be. And it truly is not. I'm glad that you said the average is about 5 houses for rentals. And when you're going through, like our Walmart are some single family homes that are in great areas that need rentals. They don't have apartment buildings there. But so, the area, we have one in Franklinton, and we just actually got rid of one that was in Dunn. So those are areas where they're up and coming. And then I feel like our riskier one is a short-term rental where you don't have control over, and I mentioned these regulations and things like that. And during COVID, we have a tiny cabin in Watauga County. And Watauga County, which is in the mountains of North Carolina, shut down short-term rentals completely. So I am just reiterating the importance of diversifying your portfolio, because I think that's so very important. I have friends who did just short-term rentals, and then they got their asses handed to them when COVID hit. Or a certain area like the Outer Banks is talking about getting rid of short-term rentals altogether. So it's just super, super important. And everything that you say rings so true to me. And I want to wrap up this first part here of never forget your plan B. What does that mean?
That means just what you were talking about. Look, if I buy a short-term rental and they regulate that thing and say, guess what? You can't do short-term rentals. I better have a plan B, right? Okay. Or if I say, hey, I'm going to buy that third property and it's going to be a future tear down. Well, what if infill rules change in 5 years and I can't tear it down, or they regulate square footage or stormwater, or, the list goes on. And so, I think as with anything in life, when you're making a big purchase or a big decision, you kind of need to have in the back of your head a little bit of, gosh, I can't control all the elements here. And so what does my plan be? And maybe your plan B looks like crap. Maybe you're praying to God it never happens. But I'd rather have a crappy plan B than, again, nothing. And there's a lot of people out there floating on a hope and a prayer. And as somebody that's been doing this since, for 2+ decades, I've seen a lot of different markets. I've seen a lot of different market conditions. And I can tell you, before every change in every big market condition we've seen, everybody said that thing wouldn't happen. In 06, 07, we're not having a market crash. Everything's going up too far, right? And then in 2019, we were like, wow, the market's done really good. It's probably not going up anymore. And then boom. And now we're sitting here saying values are never going to go down because there's no inventory. And I'm not predicting values are going to go down, but I'm just saying, gosh, history has a tendency to repeat itself more often than not. And so be smart and at least have a plan B so you know what your exit strategy is before the people that have to figure it out last second. It's always about beating your competition. Be the first one out the door or in the door. Don't be stuck in the crowd.
I love that. And listeners, you can see why I wanted him on the show. And you teach courses. You do some continuing ed for real estate agents in North Carolina, but you also teach courses. Is this through Wake Med or is this through?
I teach it through my teaching company, which is Investors Wealth Education, sometimes I host it at NC State. Sometimes I'm teaching it at Wake Tech. Sometimes I'm just teaching it through our own company. So all of it.
So what all do you teach? What can the listeners come find and learn from you?
Yeah. So from a structured course standpoint, not like a one-on-one type of situation, we really have 3 things that we focus on. One is, how do I build just a regular kind of long-term rental portfolio? Like, I don't want to do short-term rentals. I just want to do the old, peanut butter and jelly and see where it takes me. So we have a course that is about 4 hours that does that. We have a course then focused just on short-term rentals.
Nice.
That is great for people that want to enter that space, but usually have a tad of experience, not always, but they've maybe owned a long-term rental, so they understand some of it. And then we do an all-day course, which is a combination. And that's the one that we hold over at NC State in the beginning of April, in just a couple days here.
That's right.
We have that, that's an all day. And all of these, anybody can take it, whether you get CE credit or not. They're open to everybody. So I really try to encompass that. And the next course that we're working on will probably be maybe a couple months to get released. is what we're talking about right now is like, okay, ignoring short-term rental or long-term rental, right? Not making that decision. How do I build a well-balanced portfolio if I'm the average Joe that says, look, I got 15 years to retirement. I don't have the time, the capital, or the desire to own 10, 15 houses. But I feel like in the next 15 years, I could pick up 2, 3. How do I make sure that those 2 or 3 impact my life? And so that's the next course I'm working on right now.
I love it. So if you are local to the Raleigh, North Carolina area, you can go see Jason Kogok this Saturday on April 6th. And how do they sign up for that?
Yeah, so you can just go to my website. It's investorswealtheducation.com. So pretty simple.
Perfect. And then they can also, if they're listening well into the future, they can always go in there and see what else you have going on. And Jason.
That's right. We also have our course coming up this Saturday is also Zoom enabled.
Good. So it can be.
It can be. Yeah. I always tell people, hey, look, sitting in front of a Zoom for 8 hours is intense. So I always tell people like, I'd love for you to sign up, but I want you to come with the mindset like, hey, I'm going to dedicate this day and I'm going to put in the work, whether I'm behind the screen or in person, because this isn't one of those things where you kind of go to and there's maybe like more stuff after, like, oh, you did this. This is like, hey, come get your ass kicked all day and walk out of there with your mind spinning and motivated, and then put it to work, like go implement it.
I love it. And this, listeners, is why I wanted Jason on here. He is just a wealth of knowledge, but he also explains it in a way that even I understand when it comes to finances. Because normally it just goes right over my head. I'm like, Vance, did you get that? Because I did not understand what the hell just happened. But you explain things in such a great way. You are a true educator. I have a lot of respect for that. So go check out his website today, and I can't say enough great things about you. So we're going to go to the second part of the podcast, which is what makes you a badass. And I use the acronym for badass. And the first letter is B for book. What's a book that's if I can say this right, what's a book that's made a huge difference in your life?
Yeah, it's actually not a real estate book. It's the Phil Knight story from Nike, Shoe Dog. And I like that book really because I always tell people, look, you see what you're shown. And so we see what Nike is today. But if you really go back and you're like, how did that get there? It's amazing just from start to finish as just a track guy in Oregon and having a coach and all the obstacles that he went through. And it translates to any industry. But I like that because, again, we see what Nike is today, and it's easy to make the assumption like, oh, wow, that must be nice. And it's like, yeah, you see what I'm showing you. You have no idea what it took to get there. So I like that book quite a bit.
And I like that it's not a real estate book, because sometimes we got to step away and just, you know, like these other books come into your life and you're like, whoa, I had no idea. So
exactly.
I'm glad you shared that one. And I'm wearing Adidas today. I had to look down. I work out in my Nike shoes, but I just threw on some Adidas. Anyway. Yeah. Like, what is she doing? All right. Yeah. The first A in badass is for advice. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Appreciation over expectation, which is really a matter of trying to have gratitude before expecting something else, right? And so I don't remember who told it to me, to be honest with you. It's written on our board in our kitchen. You know, it's one of those things because I think sometimes we're chasing the more, especially people like us that are just driven, which is how we're wired.
Right.
And so while some people are like, oh, you're doing more, what do you want more? It's like, I don't want more. It's just how I'm wired, right? It's just, that's how we operate. But to every once in a while, kind of pump the brakes and I think give appreciation for what we have instead of always expecting something to go our way or expecting something to play out like that. It helps me kind of keep perspective on things. And I think perspective is massive. We get so caught up in this on a day-to-day basis. We're so immersed. And yet you turn on the news or you talk to a friend or a family member and all of a sudden like that, you realize money doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It really doesn't. And it's easy to say that, right? And then I walk out of here and then 10 minutes later, I'm yelling at somebody on the phone about something dumb, right? So I always kind of keep that in mind. And then the other thing that piece of advice is that I get to do this. I don't have to do this. And so what that kind of means to me is that all of us, no matter your financial means or anything, if you are even listening to this podcast about real estate investing, then you're in a position that you get to do something. You don't have to do it. And so, it's kind of like when you go to the gym and you don't want to go to the gym. I'll tell myself, look, I'm physically able to do this. I get to do this. How many people would love to hear me, be like, I wish I could bitch about going to the gym, right? So kind of putting that in perspective to say, look, I get to do this. This is a blessing to me, and stop making it sound like a chore. And again, it just circles back to that gratitude.
And I think when you get to a point in a business, like say if real estate started feeling like I have to do this, you're in the wrong business. I think. Absolutely. Yep. Man, I didn't think I could like you anymore, Jason. You are. I love the appreciation over expectation. I think that is just, you got to stop every once in a while and just take a breather. And anyway, I could keep going on, but you are awesome. All right, moving on. The D in badass is for drive. What drives Jason to be successful?
So, it's funny. It's always right. For everybody always has family, right? Family that, maybe if you have kids, that type of thing. So of course, that is what drives me on the days that I don't want to do anything. But what drives me really is just how I'm wired. I cannot sit still. I never have been able to. I'm just a wiggle worm. So for me, my drive is to actually calm the anxiety that lives inside of my head. Because if I stopped, I don't know what I would do. And so my drive is actually just kind of my biological wiring to keep going to the next thing. And I think what I have noticed by doing that, and again, putting that gratitude first and trying to give before I get, is that now what drives me is when somebody says just what you were saying, wow, I never thought about it like that. It doesn't have to be anything amazing, right? It's not like, oh my God, you changed my life. I'm not expecting that. But that little bit that says, hey, wow, you gave me a different perspective I hadn't thought about before. And now I can dive deeper down that rabbit hole. For some reason, that gives me intense joy. And so that's why I do things like this. And I go out and do presentations because I know I'm going to walk away and somebody's going to feel like, okay, I got that little nugget. That was awesome. I'm not one of those guys that's like, hey, if I can only change one life, it meant it, right? I'm not that. But I am that hey, gosh, that was helpful. Awesome. That's all I needed.
And I'm evident of that because after hearing you, I was like, oh, see, we don't have to be focused on that return on immediate investment right here. So big picture goals here. Thank you. All right. The second A in badass is for aspiration. I'm a big goal setter. So what is a goal you are currently working on?
A beach house. A beach house is actually a goal that we are
come with me. I'm going Sunday. We're going to look at a couple this weekend, actually.
No, because if I bring my checkbook and we go, we're going to have some trouble. You and I, if we were there together, I can only imagine the scheme that we would come up from. We'd go there to look at a 3-bedroom house. We'd buy a 15-bedroom house, 7,000 square feet, a pool. I mean, we'd be like, oh, this is great. And then we're both, Vance and my wife, Sam, we would be like, oh my goodness, we messed this up. So, but yeah, we're from a monetary standpoint, from a physical item, we are working towards a beach house that my wife and I would be able to retire at. And, from a business side outside of that, I have been spending a lot of time trying to grow kind of my teaching stuff. So that's kind of a little different, but those two things really.
So let me ask you this, because in your example during the interview, you were saying, your goal may be to buy a beach house. Do you buy it now, rent it out, get some money, or do you, have it, do you buy it in 15 years when you retire? So you are looking to buy it now and then make some money off it? What is your goal for this beach house?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, we are buying it in the next 2 years and using it as a short-term rental, and then end up retiring in it. Probably keep a house here in Raleigh. And even, because I like money I don't know how else to say it. So, I would even use it as a short-term rental during some of the summer when we're retired and go travel and, that type of thing. So I think that's the long term. One of the things about the beach for us is that it's a quasi investment. like, I know if we had a beach house right now that we'd rent it out most of the summer, but I know dang well we'd be there a couple weeks too,
Right.
ourselves. And so I'm more patient with this investment because it has a longer term personal effect. And so because it has a longer term personal effect, just like the cash flow, the money isn't always the number one verdict on that. We're looking for something more what works for us type of thing.
I'm jealous. I will go
We
rent
haven't
it.
got it yet.
There, well, once you get it, I'll pick a week and go out there and
There you go.
throw some cash your way. All right.
Yeah, there you go.
So the first S in badass is for systems. I am going to just assume you are a systems guy. So what systems do you have in place to help you achieve success?
You're going to be so disappointed with this.
Really?
Yeah, it is my Google Calendar and my Google spreadsheets. Yeah,
I have those.
Yeah, it's nothing glamorous, but I will say this. Like, so my wife teases me. She's like, Jason, you will schedule out in your calendar like when you're going to sneeze. So my calendar, while it may seem simple, if you looked at my calendar right now, it looks like a matrix. It's a challenge. And I've got multiple calendars. But for me, it's like clear as day. I'm like, what do you mean you don't understand that? So the calendar is really great for me. And then I use a lot of Google Drive spreadsheets because I can embed formulas and do that. And it can go anywhere with me on my phone and the app. And I like to tweak. I'm a numbers person. So I like to have really fluid ability to make the changes how I want to view them. And a lot of programs that I've seen out there from the investment side, they're awesome. Even the affordable ones, but like they're a little rigid in this maybe works for most investors, but not Jason's mind.
Right.
And so I like to tweak it for Jason's mind.
Well, I think you and Vance are probably both freaks in the sheets, right? The spreadsheets.
That's right. That is right. I love it. I love it.
Oh my goodness, this just took a left turn. All right, to wrap this up, the final S in badass is for success. What does success mean to Jason?
Well, I'm still working on it. But success for me is learning how to be present. And I am a work in progress on that. I've been told that, so I know I'm a work in progress on that, but I also can admit it. People like us that juggle a lot of stuff in between the ears have a tendency to not be able to only be present for one item at a time, right? And so success for me is learning how to turn off the stuff that doesn't need to run 24/7 and go back to that gratitude and that appreciation. So that would be my ultimate success, would be able to have that and feel like 90% of the time, if I'm there, I'm actually there instead of there and up here. So that's kind of an odd success, but yeah, that's I think that would give me like pure peace and enjoyment.
Well, I appreciate you being present today and answering my questions and reinforcing in my brain stuff that you were going over. And I'm sure your courses are amazing. And you also talked a lot, I'm getting off topic here, about tax depreciation and things like this. And are those, because you were like, Vance was doing like, whoosh, like.
Yeah. It all goes. Yeah. So in our courses, we talk about all that stuff because again, taxes are a big part of how do we use that hammer? How do we use that tool? And there's a lot of people that are swinging their tax hammer, holding it by the head, and they're swinging this thing 1,000 times and not making a dent. And I'm like, well, you're using the tool wrong. Like the taxes will always be there.
Right.
The IRS will always find the way. So accept that, first of all. And then find not the loopholes, but just find the rules that you can apply to yourself. And I think too many people, again, we just say, oh, my accountant does my taxes. They must be done right. And I'm like, says who? Like, be your own advocate. It's like going to, I used this analogy yesterday and I'll stop after this, but you ever go to the doctor and you're like, maybe your knee's hurting and you're like, gosh, my knee hurts. And like, I don't see anything wrong. And I'm like, trust me, my knee hurts. I know. Right. And it's the same thing when you go to the accountant. Just because the accountant says I did your taxes or, hey, I found all the benefits or whatever, be your own advocate. Like what makes them, I understand what makes them understand it, but I can understand it, right? I can learn it. I can give ideas and suggestions and think outside the box too, instead of just saying, oh, that's what I owe. Okay.
Right.
And move on with the day. So when you start doing that, that's where you're using your dollar efficiently. And then again, you don't need as many when you're squeezing it as tight as you can.
And we did not even touch on these topics, but you just know so much about it, which is another reason why listeners go check out his programs. And one more time, how do they find it? What's the website?
Yeah, it's investorswealtheducation.com.
Wonderful. And if you are local or want to join on Zoom, this week on April 6th, you can also go to the same website and sign up for his course on April 6th. So, Jason, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I didn't realize you were right around the corner from you. I'm going to have to come stalk you. And
for sure.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is awesome. And what you do and the knowledge you share is different than a lot of other people. So thank you for doing this.
Well, I appreciate that. And that is all. Thank you for listening. And we will catch you on the next episode. Now go out there and share your badassery. And don't forget, make it a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you for listening to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. If you need more badassery, you can follow Jen Josie by visiting therealjenjosie.com or become a member of RAIN by registering on rainmastermind.com.